Well, hello and welcome back to Roundtable Mindset. This is Jamie.
And I'm Malin.
We're here for another episode, dare I say, exciting episode of Roundtable Mindset.
It's tired, Jamie. Move on.
I have decided I'm going to own it. I was on my brother's podcast recently, Movie RX, for those of you on every major platform wanting to listen to another podcast. I was on his podcast recently, and he was teasing me for, what did he say? I think he was farting sprinkles and crapping rainbows or something to that effect, that I just always try and make it positive. So I'm just going to be excited about this because that's how we roll over here.
Well, I think we've just wrestled with it enough. Where it can't come up with any other words other than excited. So that's just what it's going to be. Hey, before we get started, I do want to mention something. I'm trying to get our first sponsor. And by doing that, I don't think it's going to pan out, by the way. But I do want to share that for those of you that listen to podcasts and maybe you are okay with your podcast player, I would recommend taking a look at Good Pods. They just recently did a massive update and it is fantastic. So I've almost been logging in every day just to see what other people are listening to. I keep trying to interject myself into their stream on X just to keep saying, hey, we really like it. Hey, will you sponsor us? Hey, we're over here. But all kidding aside, it's really been fantastic. And I found a lot. When you said trying to find different podcasts, I was like, oh, I can find different podcasts. I have probably earmarked, and I'm not exaggerating, probably close to 30 at this point that I want to start listening to. Goodness. So it's almost a problem the other way, where now I have too many.
You've kind of always had that long backlog that you're dealing with, but Good Pods it's kind of a cool little platform. I also enjoy the Good Pods, although I have been swamped at work this week, so I haven't really gotten to play with the new update yet. But I'm hoping maybe this afternoon when we're all done here.
So again, Good Pods, if you're listening, sponsor us. Please sponsor us.
I have to tell you, I feel like that's a little bit like the Girl Scout leader trying to decide which Girl Scout she's going to buy Girl Scout cookies from. Like, how do you ask a podcasting platform to sponsor your podcast and not the millions of others that they're also hosting on their website?
With low expectations is how you do it, Jamie. I really do not expect them to do anything other than just provide their platform. But you never know until you ask, right?
So. I love that.
Hi, everyone. This is JJ, the co-founder of Good Pods. If you haven't heard of it yet, Good Pods is like Goodreads or Instagram, but for podcasts. It's new, it's social, it's different, and it's growing really fast. There are more than 2 million podcasts, and we know that it is impossible to figure out what to listen to. On Good Pods, you follow your friends and podcasters to see what they like. That is the number one way to discover new shows and episodes. You can find Good Pods on the web or download the app. Happy listening.
This could also be a long shot, but maybe we should ask our new software company to host or to sponsor us too.
Why not? At this point, shoot for the moon, right?
Well, and if you guys notice anything different in our podcasting, we did get some new software to do like our recording and our editing, and so we're playing around with that. And there might be some hiccups here and there. Let's just be real honest. As we're learning the software, we might have a bit of a learning curve.
Jamie's been being a little too optimistic. There's those farting rainbows and sprinkles again. We will be having some issues. This is all brand new. But all kidding aside, can we just take a moment and say thank you to all of our supporters and our Patreon listeners? That active monthly income that comes in has been what's helping Jamie and I get to some of these new things that we've been wanting to do. And as we learn our new software, we have a lot more options and a lot more things that we can do. One of which I'm really excited about is we can now. I know I'm so excited about this.
We're not in the space to start this today or anything, but let's go ahead and preview and tease.
But we now have the ability to live stream and to have an audience gallery. So in the future, our goal is to be able to allow our Patreon supporters to be able to come on and kind of watch in a gallery. And then we're in the works to do a future episode where we actually will do it live, and we will ask our audience and our listeners to join us, ask questions, interact with us. So we're both really excited about that. But this new software makes all of that possible. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, and, thank you to my brother who has only been pushing this for, I don't know, 6 months. The 6 months he's been podcasting, he's been like, you should try this. You should try this. And I'm just always slow to try this, which is kind of the theme of every episode I'm on with him on his podcast, is the movies that I won't watch that he tells me are good until he forces me to watch them. So it's a good thing. It's a good thing.
What
Go
we
ahead.
announced to our audience a couple episodes ago, we said we wanted to do an episode where we just kind of plugged in and everyone can kind of just, I guess this is a new term for you. I thought it was common, but go down some rabbit holes with us.
No,
you didn't know what that was.
Rabbit holes are conspiracy theories. Rabbit holes is that space you get into YouTube where you see something intriguing and then all of a sudden YouTube is feeding it to you left and right. Like, oh, you like that kind of content? Let's talk about,
I always thought rabbit holes were things that you stay on a topic and it's one of those squirrels and you turn and you look, or you go down this other path, or you start talking about one thing and you end at another. I always thought those were rabbit holes. So
the ant hills.
Ant hills?
I don't know.
What? I
Okay,
can guarantee you nobody's calling them ant hills or ant nests. I'm telling you right now, Jamie.
Well, I was just thinking, if you're talking like all the different things, one of my favorite videos on YouTube is those guys that take like the melted aluminum and dump them down the ant holes and then pull out the sculptures. Those are fascinating to me. That's what you just described. So
everyone now knows that Jamie's into ant genocide, so that's good. Okay.
Well, usually they're empty.
Oh, they are not.
They're abandoned.
Oh, Jamie, please. If you believe that, I have some real estate to sell you.
Okay, I have seen them dump it into live ones, but they're like, I don't know. All the ethical ones are.
Oh my gosh, now you're talking about ethical art. It's aluminum and anthills. It's fine. It's fine.
Well, not if you're an ant person.
You called them ant nests.
Save ants. I don't know. Is there there's probably not a shortage in ants, but
no, there's no shortage of saved ants.
People. The Save the Bees people are really cool.
But you're talking about bees. Ants, I'm sure, have their own need and usage in the world, but you're talking about what, probably in the quintillion? I mean, think of all the ants across the globe. You're fine. You're fine.
Well, I can't really say anything because, there have been my days of living in the country. We had, I don't know what they're called, the tiny little ants. You know what I'm talking about? Like the teeny tiny ones.
Aren't all ants tiny?
Oh, no. No, because you have like carpenter ants and those are big ones and those are kind of mean. And then you have those little tiny, teeny tiny ones that get into the cracks of your window in the kitchen. At least this is what happened in the country where I lived. And then I had to get, I don't know. There's this we could get another sponsor. There's this amazing like ant stuff that I don't know. It's like this.
Are we really talking about ants? I mean, really? All right, I'm going to need your Dr. Pepper to kick in here for a second because
I'm just going to say, I don't know. If you're an ant person, I don't condone ants in my house, but ants are great. I love them. And I don't
take another
condone
drink, Jamie.
Ant genocide.
That was mostly kidding, but now this is fantastic. So I didn't think when we were going to start today, we'd be talking about difficult conversations about ants.
It's
so
because
thank you for
put
that.
me on the spot. You're like, oh, Jamie wants to kill all the ants. Hi, meet my friend Jamie, who doesn't care about the ants.
Okay, but let me tell you this. Do you think anybody listening is going to be like, that Jamie's horrible? Why? Because she likes art they make out of ant hills. No, not. I don't think there's one person.
I wasn't even thinking about the end user. I was thinking about myself. I don't want to be thought of as an ant. I like ants. They're fine. As long as they're not in my kitchen, I'm fine.
Well, as long as you can melt them down and turn them into art, I'm sure you think they're pretty.
Oh, Bailey, you're so mean. You're perpetuating it. Thank you. I'm so feeling the need to defend myself over and over. Okay, so this is going to be a difficult conversation. No, I'm just kidding.
If we have a difficult conversation over ants, this is only going to get better. I can guarantee you right now. Keep listening. It gets better. I promise everyone. No. Okay. So let's go back to our theme.
Sorry. This, right? If you even hear, we might just cut this whole thing out.
Oh, no. This is called gold. This is why we chose to do this. No. Okay, so seriously, one of the things that we wanted to do, and we've touched on this a couple different times, and I'm sure we'll touch on it again in season 2's theme of difficult conversations. You know, how do you talk to people? How do you talk to your kids? How do you talk to your family members about certain topics that are just unbelievable? And so we wanted to take this session, this episode, and just start having conversations around what are some of those topics that would be hard for you to have a difficult conversation with your kids about. And maybe we can talk a little bit about how we would handle that or have questions, because I'm sure there's some conversations you've had with your kids that I've never had to have with mine, or I haven't had a chance to, because your kids are older. So I think that's where we should probably start, don't you? Not with ants?
Yeah. Well, well, and not just that, but I'm even, now that you're saying that, here we go, rabbit hole or ant hill.
Don't try to incorporate it. Just move on.
No, but really, even like as a kid, difficult conversations I'm having to have with a parent, or a parent's having to have with me as an adult. You know, I guess when we talked about this, I didn't even think of, you know, ahead of me. I was just thinking behind me, because apparently it's all about me and the ants over here. But I could even start there, you know, those times that I've had a parent who was sick, right? Who had a procedure coming up or something like that. I do know that my dad definitely approaches me with caution when he's like, so I have a routine procedure, and my brain hears, oh my God, it's open heart surgery for 16 hours, right? And so right. Those are difficult conversations for him and I, and that's simply because of the history that we have, right? I mean, we've had some difficult medical things in my family, so that's hard.
Well, and just think about it, because, you know, I think we have a unique perspective now. 20 years ago, I would have no idea from a parent's point of view, just from a kid's point of view. And I would have said, oh, well, it's unfair for your parents to hide that from you. You're an adult, blah, blah, blah. As a parent, and I have an adult child now, I understand there's still that level of how much is too much to divulge. And it's not that they couldn't handle it. It's just I'm still kind of in that protecting mode. So it's like, how much information is too much information, and how much is enough for you just to get the point without over worrying you or making you go from 0 to 100 in a blink of an eye. And I never would have thought of that until after having kids. So I almost kind of see in your example, your dad holding back, not for any other reason other than you need to know what you need to know, and don't worry about the rest. And I kind of get that now as a parent. I really do.
It's funny, because even on that vein, I have a close friend of mine who is my parents' age. And we were talking about, like, she's like, we still have a right to privacy. We don't have to tell them everything we do. And then they have their 45-year-old children saying, but wait a minute, you did what? You're going where? You didn't tell me? And so that's a whole, you know, it's interesting. It has been good for me to hear from her perspective, because it's helped me understand what my expectations should be of my parent. You know what I mean? Like, hey, my dad does have a right to privacy, and he has a right to make decisions the way he makes decisions. And I don't have to be part of that. He's not deemed incapable. His brain still works just fine, and I need to stick my nose out of it. You know what I mean? But for some reason, the older he gets, not that he's like super old, but it's like the older I get, the more protective I feel, and the more, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like I need to be part of that or something.
Well, and I get what you're saying, and I also kind of hear, like, you're trying to lay the groundwork for, I think, was another difficult conversation, which is your parents are aging. Our parents are aging.
Right.
And
Right.
at some point in time, we have to assume the role of responsibility of care for the people that have always taken care of us.
Yeah.
And, you know, I agree with you. Like, I think about my own dad, and he is 100% aware. He is a hard worker. He still's running his own business. But there's not I know there's a time coming up in the not so near future where we are going to have to, my brother and I are going to have to step in and help. And is that going to be an easy transition, or is that going to be us wrestling the keys away from him because we're like, Dad, we have to do, like, you have to let go. And I hear that's kind of what you're struggling with. And I know your dad too. And it's not that there's a level of senile. That's not what this is.
No, not at
But
all.
I think we all have to talk about the time when that level of care gets moved over from them by themselves to the kids helping and supporting. And that's going to be tough. That's going to be hard. And I can't imagine the time when my father isn't going to be able to drive himself anymore, either because his reflexes have slowed down enough, or maybe he can't see or hear, or whatever the reason is. As people age, things just tend to kind of come undone. And is that going to be I'm going to use a political term. Is that going to be an easy transition of power, or is that going to be a difficult transition of power?
Oh, goodness.
I don't know.
Well, and here's the interesting thing now that we're talking about this. I see that being a possibility here in like 20 years, right? So I will be the same age at that point as he is right now. So then I'm going to have my two kids who will be the same age. Like,
No,
they're
it's
going to be
different for
having
us,
these same
Jamie.
questions.
We're different. No, we're different. We'll be
Oh,
fine.
you think so?
Yeah. They don't know anything. They're the younger generation. They don't know anything. Your kids are my kids. Right. No, they can't take care of me. They can't even take care of themselves. What are you talking about? I'm kidding, everyone. I'm joking.
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure I'm a whopping, I'm in my 40s, and my kids look at me once in a while like, are you okay? Like, so yeah. It's already starting.
I was joking with my kids. I said, I won't even say it. That's too morbid. I won't go there.
Okay, now I'm super curious. Why are we filtering?
Okay. Well, because it's kind of more. So I've talked to my kids before. Ingest, everyone, ingest. And, they see as I'm aging, and they're like, so Dad, your retirement and, your estate and stuff. Not that they're money hungry. That's not what I'm saying. They're just like, no. How does this work? And it's like, okay, first of all, don't worry about it, because that's a long ways off. And two, I have a clause that if I die from anything other than natural causes, it all goes to charity. So enjoy. They stare at me like you're staring at me. They're like, what? And I said, I'm just preserving my life. That's all I'm doing. So You have to understand it. It's out of context. The joke doesn't land. It's not funny. And you all just look at me like I'm the sick weirdo. But trust me, it makes sense in the context.
If the Sprite Cranberry Zero kills you, you get nothing. That's what you tell them.
Yeah. No falling down the stairs if I break my neck, nothing like that. No. So I have one that came to mind, Jamie, as I try to sidestep that real quick.
I was going to say, and we're out.
Yeah. One difficult conversation that I wanted to touch on is, and it's something that we've just gone through in the public school system. And that is allowing somebody else other than your family to talk to your kids about sex education. That is a real hot topic for me, and one that I don't want to say, well, I do. The school informs us, but the school, I don't think, does a good job of telling us exactly what they're covering in the material. And I don't know about you, but we opted our kids, like we talked with our kids first, and then we allowed them to go to the classes that they did. Mm-hmm. But I tell you what, it's really hard even by doing that, because there were some things that the school, and I'm using air quotes, educated our children on that they had, in my opinion, they had no business educating them on. And so I felt really strongly that they kind of sidestepped the parental awareness, and they really crossed a line that it's not the school's responsibility to teach them the morality behind a sexual education. And I feel like that's what they were doing to an extent.
See, now that was years ago for us. And I can probably say that was probably the first difficult conversation I was aware of with my kids. And I was really, I was really grateful for that, I think, because they went to their class, and they do that a couple of different times here. I don't know how they do it there. But I think it was like 4th grade and then, or maybe it was 3rd grade and 6th grade, or
I hope it wasn't 3rd grade.
I can't remember for sure. But there were it was like 2 different times, right? And one was kind of about puberty, and then the other one was more about, I don't really know. Like,
ours was 5th grade and 7th grade. 5th grade, they talked about the body changing and everybody was separated. And then in 7th grade, they had the conversation where it was, they talked about all of the formalities. I'm trying to make it really PG here.
Yep, I agree. Well, and quite frankly, I think what was helpful for me is that I remember thinking, holy crap, I don't know how to talk to my kids about sex at all, right? What was good for me is that my kids had questions about that. Like after those conversations, one of my children definitely used the information for shock value to see if he could get a reaction out of me. And that was fun for about a minute. He enjoyed that until we started, I didn't respond the way he wanted me to, and was like, okay, so let's talk about that. And then I'm uncomfortable now. But I will tell you, I think what I have appreciated about that platform is that it started a difficult conversation that I'm not sure that I could have started on my own. Like, I don't know that I would have approached them with it, and gave us a place to start, which was helpful. Because of that, I mean, even at 20 years old, I think that if my kids had questions, they would come to me. Well, I'm just going to say I know they would because they have. So that is one of those. I mean, I understand where you're coming from. I really do. But I think, I don't know. I guess I'm not all up in arms about that because the experience was helpful for me and positive for me and my kids to have those conversations. So I also don't know what they're teaching at your school compared to what they're teaching at my school. So I might have issues with what they're doing too. But I'm always going to be a proponent of them having. And I guess I also want them to know that there's other safe adults they can talk to if they don't feel like I can be a safe adult in that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think for me, some of the things that they teach our kids, or they were teaching our kids, my wife and I took a different approach. And I know this isn't the same approach everybody takes, but we ordered the materials so my wife could talk to my daughter about your body's changing. We had material that I talked to the boys that your body's changing, and so we were able to have that conversation really, really, I will say naturally, organically, whatever the right phrase is, in our home. And then when the 5th grade conversation happened, we had no problem, right? We're like, yeah, sure. We've already had a chance to talk to you. We've already had a chance to let you know. And I'm proud to say that all 3 of the kids came home and it was a non-event because they were like, oh, I think my kids had more issues because there were kids in the class that must not have heard or have been talked to about that because, and as kids do, there was a lot of snickering and laughing and tee-heeing and then there was comparing of the notes. So when the class came back together, because they separated boys from girls, there was more tee-hee and laughing and what did your video say? Blah, blah, blah. It was the 7th grade talk where my blood started boiling because again, we believe in, education around these types of topics starts with the home. And my wife and I did, again, the same kind of conversation. And we put, we came at it from our the physical approach. We came at it from the Christian approach. We came from it from an adult approach, the consequences of certain actions. Like we went through all of it. And one of the things that I did not appreciate is the fact of in our school, they brought an outside entity in called Planned Parenthood. And Planned Parenthood went through and tried to educate our kids on a lot of different things that, and in my opinion, really made it kind of a social norm. And luckily we had those conversations with our kids and they came home with even more questions. And I'm sure there's questions they wanted to ask and they didn't. But it was the first time I remember thinking, you overstepped school and you overstepped in a big way. And so we tried to address that with our school as calmly as we could. But that was something that was really hard for us because we firmly believe, I'm kind of speaking for my wife now, but we firmly believe that is not the place of the education to do that kind of stuff. To teach mechanics, fine. I'm okay with that. But to teach what is acceptable and what's not acceptable, that is where I have a hard problem. And that's where they went. That's what they educated or tried to educate my children and all the kids on. And that I didn't really appreciate.
Well, and I'll be super honest. I just had a conversation like this recently about, you have parents that feel that the school is overstepping, and then you have parents that expect the school to do all of it. You know what I mean? And I think that is a difficult space for education to be in when, you're talking about, and I don't know if you remember, you weren't in the same school as me in kindergarten, because we've established apparently by paper records that it was third grade that we got to be in the same grade. But
thank you for coming to terms with the truth, Jamie. I appreciate it.
I distinctly remember you in my class with that teacher in second grade, but whatever. So in kindergarten, when I went to kindergarten, we learned our alphabet. We learned how to write our name. We learned, you know what I mean? Like, we learned some of those foundational pieces that our children are now expected to know when they get to kindergarten, which is what's making early education even more vital, because there are kids that go to school that don't know those things. I think our society has just changed a ton since I was in kindergarten to our kindergartners now, right? Like, there wasn't the technology that was teaching me things. There wasn't, I had a parent that stayed home and was home with me. So I didn't go to preschool. I was at home with mom, and I was learning things, and we were doing things together. And that was kind of part of the conversation. But what's interesting to me is how different those experiences can be based on not just religious premises, but I feel like there really are parents who are grateful that the school is kind of filling some of those gaps, because I don't know that all parents are able to do that now. You know what I mean? Like, it's such a different world. It's a very different world, and parenting is so different now than it was when we were kids.
Well, and I know this is your realm, and I'm sure what I'm about to say will probably hit your ear differently. And I'm honestly not trying to start a fight, but at what point in time, though, it shouldn't be everybody else's responsibility to raise somebody else's kids. And when I say those words, I'm not saying that people can't help out, but I agree with you 100%. I think in society today, people drop their kids off at the school for 7-8 hours. I know my kids have friends who go to school. There's a before the school, like activity or I can't remember what I'm trying to say, group
like
that they're part
program.
of. School program. So they go in, sometimes I think it starts at 6:30 in the morning. So they get dropped off there. And again, I'm not faulting parents. Parents have to work. I get that. But I'm saying this is the reality that we're in. They drop their kids off at that program, and some of their friends go at 6:30 in the morning. They'll have breakfast at school. They'll spend all day at school. And then they have to go an after school program that their parents don't get to pick them up until 6:30 at night. So you have some of these kids that are staying in this school system for 12 hours a day. And I think there's almost this thought process is, well, you have them half the time, you should be able to touch on all these things. And parents that work and they can't be with their kids, or they have to take advantage of these programs, I'm sure there is a level of, well, I'm not around, or I can't do it, or whatever it is. But I think a difficult conversation that needs to happen is, I think the school system needs to tell parents, it's your job to be a parent. It's our job to educate your children. And there has been a line that has been blurred in the recent years. And just to take your example, when we put our kids through preschool, there were certain standards and things that had to be met. Like, they had to be able to be potty trained. They had to be able to recognize certain things. And then once that they crossed those thresholds, they were able to come into preschool. And we started out sending our kids to I'll say a private preschool. The public school system didn't have a preschool yet. Legislation changed between my oldest and my youngest, where preschool became part of the public school system in the state that I live. Once that happened, we let our kids go to the public preschool. And I can tell you the transitioning even from that to what we're seeing today is huge. Like, there's no more standards of what kids need to know. There's no more, I would say, expectations of parents to be able to provide their kids what I'll call basic building blocks. It is almost they met a requirement of age. Here you go. It's your job to do everything that we were supposed to do for them. And I can't say, and I don't want to say that that's across the board. That's every parent, because that's not fair. But I can see definitely a trend. And so maybe we need to have a difficult conversation to say there is a difference between being a parent and being an educator or a healthcare provider, because I know there's a lot of things going on in the school district now where teachers are having to take on different roles that they would never meant, or as a parent, I wouldn't want them to solely do on their own, like providing some sort of level of healthcare, providing some sort of level of mental health, providing some sort of level of, physical restraint to some of these children. And so you put all of those in a box, and then you add the last one on it. It says, oh, by the way, we need you to parent our children because we're not around. Something's going to break. And I just don't want it to be our education system. So we need to maybe have a difficult conversation around that.
Well, and quite frankly, I'll be honest. I think that there are so many, just like everything, right? Like every problem or every social challenge that we talk about, it's so multifaceted that it's difficult to say, aha, I found the key and here's the answer, right? Because, I even think about my time when I was working in early childhood. It was interesting to me how intentional we need to be now compared to when we were kids. I don't remember my mom sitting down with me and being like, okay, are you ready? Here's a picture. And this is happy. And this is what happy feels like. And this is what sad feels like, and things like that. Because I think we were able to interact when we could have a parent home. And I think that was still pretty common when we were kids, that there were lots of lots of our friends' families had a parent stay home and a parent work, or the work schedules made it so that they could stay home with us while we were home, but those interactions is how we learn so many things. Social emotional skills. It's how we learn just some basics. And now that we live in a space where both parents really have to work, my kids took advantage of that after school program. They were at school until 5:30. I usually pick them up at 5:30. And then guess what? I have about 3 hours with my kids between the time I pick them up and the time I put them to bed. And that makes it really difficult to have like those meaningful interactions like that. I mean, we did the best we could, and I did everything I could to make sure that we made that time as valuable as we possibly could. But my kids were at school as long as I was at work. And that made it really hard in the evenings to try and do that. So in no way am I like lambasting parents. And I do think that there is a balance, and I do think that it takes a village. It really does. We can't sit in our home and raise our kids all by ourselves and not expect to have some community involvement in them, and that's important. But yeah, that is one of the first examples of difficult conversations that we had. Although for my specific situation, there was the whole adoption piece too. And so those were some difficult conversations that we had at a really young age. There were times that my kids wanted to see their bio family, and it wasn't a visit weekend, and there was nothing I could do about that. And those are some really hard conversations to have with my kids. Why can't I see my bio family? Why is that a thing? Difficult conversations start really young, don't they? Like, well, when we were talking about this, I was thinking those adult things, like, let's talk about sex and drugs and rock and roll, right?
Right.
But no, some of those things start really early.
Well, and some of those, I want to touch on something you just said, but some of those will come from decisions we make, even in the best of intentions as a parent to a child, that turn around to be either not the right decision or the wrong course of action because of our inexperience of being a parent, or just how our children would take that. Sometimes I have the same conversation with I'll say even between my two sons, just leave my daughter out of it for a second, and I can get two completely different outcomes. It's because maybe my approach was the same, but it's because they take that information and they apply it differently within their own brains. And so I agree with you. I think these types of conversations that take place, they can be something that we didn't intend them to be difficult conversation. In fact, we might have made something a difficult conversation just because of the actions that we did with the best of intentions. And that's something as a parent that I've kind of had to learn over the years is, I try to avoid catastrophes, right? I try to avoid cleaning up spills and messes. Well, sometimes they're unavoidable because you don't intend them to be a mess. They just turn into one. At least that's been my experience. But one thing that you said, Jamie, that I want to touch on is, and again, I can't hold a candle to your experience, your adoptive experience. And I'm not trying to say, oh, I can relate in a lot of ways, because I can't. I've never had to have that conversation with my kids. I'll never know what that is like. But the closest thing I can get to, and we've never done this before, but we have some family drama that's going on. And for the first time, because of this, what I believe is the safety of my children, we had to limit access to certain family members to our children. And so when you said that, it kind of hit my ears like, well, I don't have the adoptive family, the bio family that I have to work with,
Right.
but there is still family dynamics even within my own extended family where we have to have difficult conversations to say, and when my wife and I tried to do it very surgically, we tried to do it like, this is a season. We don't know how long it's going to last, but this is why we need you to kind of unplug from these family members, at least for a while. And, depending on their age, we could have, or we might not have told them the whole story. But we tried to tell them enough that they could understand there is a need to do this. And that was very difficult because we've never done that in the past. And I don't want to do it in the future. But right now, where we're at, it was necessary. And that was very difficult. That was a very hard conversation to have. So I can only imagine that from your lens, as I try to kind of connect the two pieces together. But that was a conversation that I've never thought I had to have with my kids that left me speechless a couple different times, just because I don't want to damage that relationship, but at the same time, I need them to be aware of what's going on with that relationship, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, because I think there's so much, and that is something interesting. That's an interesting commonality, because I think so often, especially when my kids were younger, there was automatic trust because that's my family, right? And it stinks that our kids have to learn that sometimes even someone with the label of family may not be safe. That might not be a safe space. And that is a hard, it's a hard, yucky conversation to have. So I'm empathetic to not just you, but the kids, because that is really hard. Well, and one of the most difficult conversations I've had as an adult is with someone labeled family, that I had to make that choice, that it was not a safe space to be in. I won't go into a ton of details, which makes me feel kind of bad. Like I kind of wish I could just let it all out there, but I'm not going to. Just to protect, really to protect any future possibilities in the situation, that like I don't want to lambast somebody all over international podcast waves. But
it's the truth, folks. It's the truth.
But I mean, as an adult, to find a family member that that I was really close to and had a lot of still have a lot of affection for, is not a safe place for me to be in, and for whatever reason that might be, and ironically, I will say that is kind of where this podcast idea for me kind of sprung from, because that was a space that was not safe. And it really became clear during COVID and the political things that have happened in that space in the last 4 or 5 years, I would have no friends if I cut everyone off that disagreed with me, because I live in the middle of a state that is the absolute opposite from me.
I think my name would be like number 1 on the list. If you were going to do that, it'd be like, Malin, check.
Literally, I think I'd have like 4 Facebook friends, because so I'm not one of those people that goes and like deletes people who just are posting things that annoy me on Facebook. There have been a couple, but only because it's like really kind of inflammatory and I just don't need that in my life. But you know what I'm saying? So, I mean, I always live in a space of a rub where I'm not part of the mainstream here, and that's okay. But that was such a hard place for me to be. And what has resulted from that difficult conversation and the separation that has happened has been it's really sad to me. And um, I think that's the hard reality of some of these hard conversations, is that sometimes it can go beyond repair, and sometimes there's separation that can't always be, I guess, made up or repaired. And that, that's kind of that's a sad reality of it. That sometimes these things really can cause that permanent separation.
It's tragic when that happens, because as much as, and I know, Jamie, you know who I'm speaking about. And again, for the reasons you said very eloquently, I don't know what this relationship with this extended family member is going to look like in the future. And I don't want to do anything on here that's going to jeopardize it, but I'm trying to give enough information to give context to what we're talking about. But it's hard because, especially when these conversations take place and there's an innocent party, right? There's many times that I'm part of a conversation that maybe I'm choosing it for myself, or the other person has chose it for me. But in conversations like these, where I'll just say from my experience with my kids, they didn't do anything wrong. And yet they're the ones I'm asking, I need you to step away from the family member for just a little bit. It's not fair to them. And we do our best to explain it without damaging that relationship in the future. But also why we're trying to protect our kids. And it's a very hard line to cross or to walk. And it's one that they, in my particular case, they only saw the good of this family member. And yet what I see of this family member is requiring me to tell my children, I need to protect you. And that by itself is a very hard conversation. And it goes back to the trust that I've built with my kids. They know, they might not understand it, but they know that when I throw a boundary up and I said, listen, I don't want you to cross this. And here's as much of the information I can tell you as to why, and it still might not be 100% clear. They need to trust that, because I'm doing it for their sake. I'm doing it for their safety. And in my particular case, it seems to be working, and they trust, and they have no ill will towards this family member. So if this family member is by chance listening, it's not that we're trying to turn our children against you. It's that I have to protect my kids. And right now protecting them means they need to be unplugged. And I don't know how long that's going to be, but it's a very hard road to walk when you're trying to protect the other person, but also protect your kids from that person.
Well, and even that space, it's something something I just thought of, is how hard it is, because when you and I walk into one of these difficult conversations together, you and I are deciding to talk about something hard, we can both decide we're going to come into it with an open mind. We're going to come into it, at least a willingness to listen, right? And not maybe, an effort not to snap judge, an effort not to do whatever. It's really difficult having a conversation with our children who aren't in a space or have the skills necessarily to be like, okay, mom, I'm going to hear you out. Because usually it is, I'm going to try and talk to you about this thing, and kid puts up the wall because you just don't get it. You're judging, you're out of touch, whatever. And then it's like, how do you proceed with that conversation when you know that the skills are different? And that has made, I will be super honest, that has made some of the conversations that I've had to have with my kids super difficult, because they don't hear the intention behind it, because they're not ready to hear, or because they don't have the ability to be like, okay, this isn't about my feelings. This is about mom trying to show me something, or whatever the case might be. And so that reaction, then guess what that typically does? It creates a reaction from me. And you mix the reactions together, and kaboom, you have this awful thing that doesn't always go real well, because, it's like there's two different sides to that. So, that is probably the hardest thing that I had to learn. And thankfully, as my kids have gotten older, their skills have grown, and my ability to communicate to them, like, okay, before we have this blow up that we have regularly when I try to tell you something you don't want to hear, I just want you to know this is going to be hard to hear. And, we're just having a conversation. I'm not, I'm not coming with any sort of like, hey, it's okay. You know what I mean? So I'm super grateful to know now, on the other side of graduation from high school, that we do grow those skills eventually. But man, those are some difficult places to be when you've got, especially when you've got kids who are just trying to fit in and just trying to, you know what I mean? Like if I can put myself back in those spaces when we had the most difficult conversations, which was middle school and high school, those are hard times. Those are very difficult times where the social pressures are so big that when our parents come in with any other sort of pressure, it's like too much. It's too much to handle, too hot.
Yeah, and while you were talking, Jamie, I had something that popped in my brain. I kind of want to twist this a little bit because it makes my brain kind of go, "Ooh." We've talked a lot here about difficult conversations that we've had with our children or other people, but what about the difficult conversations people try to have with us?
Oh God.
I'm sitting here going, okay, yeah, difficult conversations when we're the ones, or I'm the one that's has to go to somebody. What happens when somebody has to come to us?
It's funny that you say that, because I remember, I don't know, I'm like feeling really proud of myself right now, because I remember how hard that would have been, like just 10 years ago, for someone to be like, hey, Jamie, there's this thing that happened and I'm really uncomfortable with it. And I'd be like, say what? Like, bring it. You know what I mean?
Challenge accepted. You want to talk to me about an issue? You better come fully prepared.
Yeah. You better come packing with some serious facts and attitude, because I'm just going to give it right back. It's funny how the older I get, the more willing I am to accept that I could be wrong. Because I think those are probably those are the most difficult conversations, right? When someone is trying to tell us that we're wrong, or that we did something wrong, or that we weren't, I don't know, like.
Well, I agree with everything you just said, by the way. And, our listeners have known us long enough now that everyone's probably like, oh, this is no surprise. It was very hard to have a difficult conversation with me when I was young, because I knew I was right and I knew you were wrong. So anything you brought to me, I was basically made of Teflon. Like, you throw anything at me, it's just going to wipe right off because you're ridiculous. And there was an attitude that I had that honestly I wasn't aware that it was an attitude, but it was there. And I've had to learn that even in today, I wish I could say that I am completely 100% transformed. I probably am at least 80% better than I used to be, with still some work to go on the last 20. But what it still reminds me is that there are certain situations, there are certain circumstances where those old habits come back. And so I had to start looking for what are the difficult conversations people want or are trying to have with me, but because of how I'm responding to them, they're not being able to be as bold with me as somebody should, right? So I have to look for the hidden, like, is this a clue, or a context clue that you're trying to address something serious with me? I've had to start training myself to look for those, because I have the luxury of having someone like you, Jamie, and my wife, who you'll just lay it out there. Like, this is what we need to talk about. Okay, great. And then I also have people in my life that they can't or won't do that with me because of my own actions, and sometimes maybe not. And I've had to look for those subtleties to say, oh, this is what they're trying to do. And there's been a couple cases, probably more notably in my work, in my professional life, where I've had to come alongside somebody and help them, which is a weird dynamic, by the way, help them have a difficult conversation with me to get their point across. Because I wasn't hearing it. I wasn't getting it. I was like, you're being too kind. You're being too gentle. Like, I'm missing your point and you are struggling with something that I'm doing. I need you to tell me more. And so I'm rambling now, but that's part of a difficult conversation that until I really sat down and started thinking about, I would not have categorized that as a difficult conversation, but it is for the other person. And then I almost have to become an ally for that person to have the conversation with me. It almost sounds comical when you say it out loud, but in reality, that happens. And does that happen with you, or do you know anybody that kind of happens to, or am I just a big enough jerk that I have to help people fight with me?
Well, no, I think probably the biggest difference is just the worlds that we live in, right? Like, I mean, I live in a world of mental wellness, and I work in that field, so we're constantly trying this. We're constantly trying to perfect the communication, and so whereas I don't know, I imagine nonprofit corporate America is like, this is what needs to be done. It's a little more black and white. I feel like we might be a little more living in gray spaces a little better over on our side of the fence. But what's interesting is how often when I think about those difficult conversations that have been hard for me to hear, like that I have been the difficult part of that conversation, it's usually because I feel self-defensive, because I feel misunderstood. How did we not think of this before we started recording? Because I'm like, yeah, I am not the Maharaja of like difficult conversations. I screw it up all the time. Like, I totally take things wrong. What I think is good for me though is that I have definitely learned, I'm grateful that I've learned to not react. And that is probably, I think if I could give everyone a magic pill for difficult conversations, it's like, rethink your reactions, because the reactions are probably the space that makes it yucky and ugly. I have learned to not react. I have learned not to give the snap answer, the snap judgment, and I can take it away. What's interesting for me, and I wonder if this is probably not the same for you, is that then this becomes the inner tape that I listen to and replay over and over and over again. And then I stress about it. I'm like, oh my God, I'm a horrible person. Because I did say that. I did do that horrible thing, and I'm so sorry, and I don't know what to do. Like, it just... And Malin,
Yeah,
I don't know if that's your space.
it's not. And I need to have an inner tape, and I don't have one. Like, I try really hard to sit there. It's not that I can't self-actualize or self-analyze. I can do all of that. It's just the desire to do it is not always there. And there's times when I can go and I can have a really strong conversation. And let's just not make it poisonous. It's a very well intended, it's a necessary conversation, but it's a firm conversation, and it has to be there. I can say that and walk away and just forget it. I can just take it out of my mind and be like, whoop, I'm done. Even if the person took offense to what I said, it's like, nope, they have to worry about that, not me, because this is my intention. What I'm learning and what I'm trying to grow towards is I do need to have some sort of tape that runs from time to time. I'm going to say time to time because I don't think they're always needed, but anyways, where I do need to play that back, because that's how I continue to improve my soft skills. Because like you said, the reaction, I would say 90% of a difficult conversation is all in how you deliver it. And I firmly believe that. If you walk in there, and I've done this, with a sledgehammer and start bashing things around in this emotional arena, you're going to damage things. Either going to damage your reputation, you're going to damage the other person's psyche, you're going to damage the friendship, you're going to damage the trust that was built. Something is going to be destroyed. And so you really do. I'm learning this. I can't say I've learned it because it's still a work in progress, but I'm learning that there is times when you have to walk in, and how you approach the conversation and how you deliver the conversation is probably more important than what you actually say in the conversation. And I continuously try to do my best to improve that. I'm not always great at it. I'm not always successful, but it's something that I work on very hard. And so no, that inner tape is something that I have to consciously stop and take a listen and say, okay, where could I have gone better? Would that person have taken offense to what I've said? Even if they didn't show it at the moment, I try to put myself in there. And there has been a couple times when I went to the person afterwards and say, you know, I hope I didn't come across too harsh, or I hope I didn't shut you down. Here was my intention. Did you get that from our conversation? And to be completely transparent, there's times where people are like, yeah, we're fine. I totally understand. And there's been some moments of learning that I had to do because the other person was like, no, you went personal. You went, instead of going the high road, you went into the gutter. You said some things to me that I will never be able to not hear. And those are things that are sad for me because, again, my intentions have never been, well, I shouldn't say, in the conversations where I'm not intending to hurt somebody, I don't want to hurt somebody.
Yeah.
And when that happens, it's really hard for me because, again, you know me well enough, Jamie. If I wanted to hurt somebody, I have the ability that in a conversation, I could. I try very hard not to, but a younger self, you've witnessed me grow up into the person I am now. I think you would agree there was a time in my younger days where I could digest somebody and pick my teeth with their bones and not even care because they annoyed me. And that's not the space I want to be in. And I'm trying to be different from, but those old habits kind of come back. So it's a hard road to walk.
Well, and that retrospective space that I wasn't expecting today too. Like, how do I be a safe person for someone to come and have that conversation? You know, like, it's funny because I'm even thinking of a couple of examples that we've had recently where, you know, I know you have approached with caution because not necessarily because I'm going to like respond with rage, but even like, I don't want to hurt this person. I don't want to, I don't want to offend this person, whatever that might be. And I have been in spaces where there are people that it's just really difficult to have a conversation with, to say, hey, well, and the older I get, the more I learn in the different workspaces that I've been, like to be able to say, hey, you're doing great. And we need this. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that is one of the tools I was given years ago, like probably 4 or 5 years ago, like that these two things can exist in the same space. So not only do I need to understand that I can be really doing a great job over here and still need to improve this over here. Those two things can exist together, as well as when I go to someone else, like, how do I make sure that you understand I don't think you're a horrible person and this hurt my feelings? You know what I mean? Like, those two things can exist in the same space.
Absolutely. Well, and I'm looking at the time and I know we're approaching an hour, but maybe we can do a round robin. I don't want to go into deep dives here, but I'm just curious, like, do you have off the top of your head, do you have a list of things that would be a difficult conversation for somebody to come and talk to you about?
So for the other person or for me?
For either one. Like, you have to have a conversation with someone or someone has to have a conversation with you. Like, I have a couple off the top of my head that if I have to have, or somebody would try to have with me, it would instantly put me in a place where everything wonderfully we've just talked about for the last 10 minutes would go out the window because I'm like, oh, you're touching on something you need to walk away from because this is not going to go good for you.
I think my family would tell you anytime they want to talk about politics would probably be the space if it's opposing. I mean, if you want to ask me questions about whatever X, Y, and Z, it's fine. But if you want to tell me that what I think is wrong, I think they think that that's a space I'm in. I think it would be difficult. It is difficult for me if someone feels harmed by something I did or said. That is always a hard conversation for me, to be approached and said, hey, you hurt my feelings when, or this really hurt me or whatever. Because I really do try so hard not to cause harm. And focus a lot of energy on that. And so when someone does feel or see malintention in something that I've done, that is really hard for me to, I don't know if it's just hard for me to accept, I think, because it's just not my intention. And I hope that everyone around me knows that that's not my intention. So I do feel a little slighted when I'm like, you know me, you know, I wouldn't do that. That's not, you know what I mean? Like, come on. So those are
Right.
probably the two spaces. Oh, and criticize my parenting.
Okay, that was number one on my list.
Yeah.
When you have to have a conversation, because I don't know about you, but there's been times when I've had to mention something to somebody about how they parent their child. Now, I'm being very vague because I don't want to give any specifics, but I'm not talking like I'm walking down the mall and there's a kid that's like having a little tantrum and I step in and be like, you need to parent your child better. No, nothing like that. This was a, this
Not
was a
that you're
family
above
that.
that.
Yeah, no, not that I'm above. I have
kidding.
done that. No, I'm just kidding.
I have an opinion. Just ask me. I'll tell you.
No, I didn't even have to have people to ask me. I have an opinion. You're going to hear it. That's where we're at. No, but there was a time when we were getting close with a family and our kids played together, and there was something that I've seen from the child and how the parent reacted, and I thought I was doing a good thing by saying, "Oh, I noticed this, and I just wanted to kind of share it." It ended the friendship. Like it was like, no,
we haven't talked since circa 2014.
Seriously, like they just switched everything off. And again, my intention wasn't to say you're a horrible parent. My intention was, hey, I value you. I like you. I saw this. Can this help you? And it was taken completely as if you have no idea what you're doing as a parent. You need to do this. Yeah. On the flip side, if somebody would come to me and say the exact same thing, and we've kind of even touched on it even in this conversation, I would have done the exact same thing. So I understand. So if by chance those individuals are listening, just know I'm sorry. Call me. I will iron everything out. I'll apologize. But that was a big one for me, is when you get to parenting. The other thing that would really set me off, and again, this could be a valid conversation that someone's trying to have with me or I'm trying to have with someone else, but it's super personal, is what you do as a profession. Feeling like you're being criticized or having to tell somebody else what they're doing is, even as a profession, needs to be fixed, or there needs to be changes there. That I'm looking at myself right now. I would have a very hard time listening to that. And what's really funny about that statement I just made is that I'm a big proponent of feedback. Give me feedback. I want to learn from it. I also want to know that I'm good at my job. And when you don't tell me I'm good at my job and give me feedback, well, now you're just telling me how to do my job and we have a problem. And that's 100% me. But that's how my brain works, right? Like, I need you to know, and I need you to show me that you think and believe that I know how to do my job. And this feedback is just to help me continue to do a really good job at my profession.
Right. It's funny that you talk about the parenting thing too, because that is kind of my job. Like, my world and my work revolves around parents who come to me and say, these things are not working, and this is all of the hard stuff that we're dealing with, and I don't know what to do. And I think the thing and the theme that I have come away from this conversation with is really like that space of trust. You know what I mean? Like, having trust with the person that you're trying to have a difficult conversation with is probably key to making it less difficult. If I didn't trust you, I don't know that I could do this podcast with you, because I don't know, like, I have to know that at the end of the day, you have care for me as a person, and the thing that you might off the cuff say that, stings to the core
all the time.
Of the soul.
All the time. And then, again, just a segue, sometimes I mean them, and sometimes I absolutely don't. And I feel the worst when I don't. And you're like, that really stung. I was like, ooh.
Well, like the other day when you were like, I did not intend, that's not what I was saying at all. And I was totally like kidding when I was like, oh, so here's what I'm hearing. And you're just like, holy crap, I didn't mean that. So I felt kind of bad, but But no, I think that trust is what helps us have those difficult conversations. It's probably not the person that's walking down the hallway in the mall that you need to stop and give your opinion to, right? Like they don't need your constructive feedback or your deconstructive feedback. They probably don't need your feedback at all. It's the people that, that have put us in that space to say, hey, you are a trusted person that I do need that from. Those are the places that we probably really need to share it and keep the rest to ourselves.
You just blew my mind here, Jamie, because I never thought about this until just now. But what if an element to having this be a difficult conversation is the trust that you're trying to protect with somebody? Because is it really a difficult conversation if I go and give somebody my opinion if I don't know them and there's no tie back to me and it's just me almost doing a drive-by opinion? No. And I don't care what the person does with it, right? Like, whatever, do what you want. But what makes it difficult is that level of trust or that relationship that you're trying to keep intact. And that's really like, that kind of was a light bulb moment for me. It's like right now I was like, wow, what if these conversations aren't really difficult except for the type of relationship that you're trying to have these conversations in is what makes them difficult, because you're trying to protect what's there or grow what's there, not destroy it.
No, I think you are 100% right. I think back to when we were in college or high school and you came to visit me here and you were acting a fool. And I was like, stop. And you're like, I don't live here. I don't care. Like, you didn't have anyone around you that knew who you were, and there was no need to protect yourself from their opinions. But I think you're right. I think that that's a big piece of the difficult conversation is not, having it with someone that you care about. I could probably, yes, I know you could argue with Joe Schmo on the street all day long for fun, for sport. But it does become a little more difficult when it's you and I, because, I don't want to harm you, and I definitely don't want to feel harmed by you.
Well, thank you for stopping short to say, and I wouldn't want to harm you, Jamie, but I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
But, I think that those are definitely, I do think that adds the layer of the difficulty. I don't know that those conversations about politics and COVID would have been as hard it was someone I didn't care about, because then it would just be facts and figures and I'm going to go to bed knowing I'm right. But to feel so criticized by someone that I care about is what made that so hard,
Or feeling like you're coming across as criticizing someone when all you're trying to do is apply care for that individual, right?
Yeah.
When you're like, hey, I really care about you. I need you to hear me. I'm really concerned about this. And maybe that's another thing, as we're, again, not expecting this, but maybe it's what I consider to be important. I have to have a realization that that's not the same thing that the person I'm talking to has the same. Maybe they don't consider it important, or they have a different importance on it. Right. So maybe take your COVID conversations. There's a point of view that I wanted to have that seemed like it was invalid for you, that was frustrating to me. But that's because I wasn't understanding, or I wasn't being aware enough to say the level of concern for COVID is different for you than it was for me. Mm-hmm. And so my conversation with you around that, I wasn't taking into account that element before. And I think if I think across some of the other difficult conversations that I've been part of, I think that's a common theme, is that I come into these conversations with a certain level of understanding of what's right and wrong, or what's important or not important. And I just assume the other person has the exact same viewpoint as me, and they don't. And when they don't, that's where friction starts happening. Because again, I'm not in the moment, I'm not there saying, oh, they're thinking differently than me. It's why are they so wrong, and why can't they see it? And right. they need to be educated. They need to be taught. They obviously aren't seeing the way that I'm seeing it, and they're wrong. And I need to make sure that they see what I'm seeing so they can be right just like me. And
well, even the intensity in that is comes out of care. You know what I mean? Like the intensity of you not being wrong. If I think back to like our religious conversations, I can look at that in a whole different context to say, okay, Malin's not attacking me because I don't believe the things he does. Malin is intense about this because he wants what's good for me. And I always have to remember that, because it doesn't feel that way. And not because of the way you deliver it even, but because of the place that I sit and my perspective in it, it doesn't always feel like it's care. It feels judgmental sometimes. You know what I mean? But if I can stop and remember, like, no, if it's somebody that cares about me and that I care about, it's not typically out of judgment. It's typically out of concern.
Yeah, that was another one that was on my list since we're doing round robin. I know we have to wrap up as religion. The other one, and this hasn't happened to me yet, but I can only imagine. In my childhood, I had friends that, they were caught either using, I'll say marijuana, drugs, whatever it is. But I couldn't even imagine as a parent having that conversation with your kid. We've had the no drug conversation, but I've never had, and I hope I never have to, have the conversation of, now I know that you're using drugs, and what are we going to do about it? And the kids would be the hardest one for me, but let's talk about, as an adult, another adult friend or a spouse or, something like that. I can only imagine that would be a very hard conversation or difficult conversation to have. And again, I don't have any experience in that, but that was on the mental list that I was making as we were talking. So
I think one of the hardest for me as an adult was, there was a time where I cut off all contact with my mom. And that was really difficult. It was really, really hard when I felt like I had to set a good, solid boundary to protect myself and my own family. And that person that has been there for you your whole life, right? In some capacity or another. And then to have to say, I can't do this right now. And I know I've watched, and my mom passed away God, how many years ago is that? Probably 15, 16.
So wasn't it 2007? I have it on my calendar. Just a second.
Yeah, something. Yeah, 2007. I think you're right. Because I think the kids were 3 when that happened. So, but that was like, I imagine after that, I've seen a lot of like, I don't know. I get stuck in mental health TikTok a lot. And so I see these videos of like adults who are struggling with their parents who either I don't know if you'd call it gaslighting, but can't accept or can't I don't know what the word is, but like try to portray things differently than the way they were, like that their perception is different. So like as a child, you did these things that were hurtful, and for a parent not to be able to listen and validate that as an adult, once I'm an adult, is difficult. And I imagine I would be in that space with my mom where she is so justified in her parenting or justified in her actions that it would have been very difficult to have some of those conversations with her, just given how that conversation went. How, hey mom, I need some space. Like I cannot come at every phone call. You need to have some supports around you because I am not that person. I am not intended to fill your bucket. That's not the space that I'm in. I have a family that I need to support, and you need to do that for yourself. It was a really hard space to be in as an adult, and probably one of the most difficult spaces to have conversation in. And then to not have that conversation was really hard too,
Yeah. Well, and I never even thought about, until your example right there, about the times would be a difficult conversation where somebody needs my help and I can't give it to them. That would, I don't know. Or I need somebody's help and they can't give it to me. Beyond the, hey, can you come over and help me? No. Okay. Go to the next friend. Something like this. I don't even know I don't know what my reaction would be to it. And I don't know what would be, using air quotes, the right reaction would be. Mm-hmm. But that would be a very hard discussion to have. I can imagine.
Yeah. Any conversation I have to say no in is kind of hard for me because I like to say yes. I like to be the yes person.
Awesome. Yes. I need to borrow some money, so we'll talk after this.
All right.
All All right. I think we've gone down enough rabbit holes. I hope everyone that's listening, if you enjoyed this type of format, just let us know. Again, I'm going to speak for myself. I was a little bit uncomfortable at the beginning just because I like to know that bridge work of what we're going to cover and there would be no real surprises. Even though within the conversation we go down a couple different things, I still like the safety of knowing, okay, this is the item that we're talking about. But then as this conversation went on, it was fun. It was kind of nice to kind of see it go down different paths. And so I enjoyed it. So if our listeners are enjoying it, let us know. See if you want us to do this type of format again in the future. But what did you think about it, Jamie?
Well, I feel the need to reiterate we're not doctors, lawyers, therapists, any of those professions to give any sort of special advice. This was just us talking about our opinions and our experiences, and that was kind of cool. Sometimes I feel a huge burden about like not spreading misinformation or making sure the facts are as current and factual as can be, and it's kind of nice just to have a conversation. So thanks for doing that with me, even if it started with ants.
Yeah, started with the ants. Who would have thought? So again, and just to take a moment as we wrap up, I just want to say we want to give a big thank you to everybody who's listening. Again, wherever you listen to us, if you could do us a favor and just like and share and follow, tell somebody else about us, we'd really appreciate it. And for all of you that are out on Patreon and helping us support us financially that way, we literally could not have done this without you. And so we say thank you. And as we continue down our podcasting, I'm going to use it, Jamie, our podcasting journey. We continue to hope we can bring different content and different ways to interact with our audience base to make this really about a roundtable experience. I think that's when we decided we wanted to do a podcast. That was really the desire in our minds, and I would say our hearts, was we wanted to create a place where it felt like you could come to a table and have a discussion with anybody about anything. And it doesn't mean it's going to be always a pleasant conversation, but when you walk away, everybody feels like they had the ability to say what was on their mind and to be heard a little bit. And we continue to do that with our new advancements in technology and software. So we just want to say thank you. So thanks again.
Yeah. It's humbling and really fun and exciting, this journey.
There it is.
On.
I was going to say, there it is. All the other buzzwords, let's just throw them in there. Buzzword soup.
We will go there. So, all right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us on this episode of Roundtable Mindset. We hope you'll join us again next week when we'll dissect a new topic to talk about difficult things, because that's the theme for the season. So join us next week. Hope to see you there.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.